Well, hello, and welcome to the webinar on Agile Team Knowledge Sharing. My name is Mikhail, and I will be providing this webinar today. So before we start, we have some things to do. First of all, let's wait a couple of minutes for those guys who are late for the webinar. And meanwhile, let's check if you hear me actually. So there is a chat somewhere in your this GoWebinar application. So if you hear me and see me, please type yes there, so I will know that there are no problems. I will chat you. Well, the funny thing that I don't see anything in the chat right now, so yeah, you go there in the questions. Okay, fine, hi. Yeah, I see that everything is fine. I have a story to tell before we start. I'm not alone here today. My fellow colleague, Simon Petkov from Agile Practice, he is also here. And he will help me to answer your questions if you have any during the webinar. So if you see someone else answering your questions, and if you see that his name is Simon, so that's fine. Okay, I think we have waited enough, so it's time to begin. Let me first of all introduce myself. My name is Mikhail Podurets. I'm an Agile coach in Luxoft Agile Practice, and I hold several international certificates, and among them I have an IC Agile Authorized Trainer badge. It's not actually a certificate. So what it means, I will explain you in the next slide. The thing is that if you have any questions left after our webinar, so please feel free to contact me via my email, Facebook, or LinkedIn. and we may continue our discussion after the webinar. A little bit of the context of the current webinar. So, as you probably all know, this webinar is a part of an IC Agile Fundamentals track, which means that all of you who will be active during the webinar, I will see from the system I'm using to provide the webinar, who will stay with me up till the end, will receive an email from me after the webinar, and I will issue certificates, not the certificates, the credits to cover the learning objective we're discussing today, which is knowledge sharing. I would also like to mention that there are this training, IC Agile Certified Professional, is the starting point for all of the knowledge paths in IC Agile. So if you're interested in different knowledge areas of Agile development or management or leadership or coaching, so this is a good point. You came to the right place. Now, so let's probably start with this. Topics to discuss, what we will discuss today. We will discuss the cost of documentation creation and maintenance of documentation in Agile projects and in traditional projects. We will talk about some good practices for Agile documentations, which will be more of our recommendations to you and some good approaches that usually bring a lot of good. Then we'll talk about difference in explicit and tacit knowledge, because it is a really important thing to discuss during this webinar. And then I will give you some description of what the explicit knowledge is, of practices for sharing the knowledge. So what it's all about. So we all know that one of the values in Agile Manifesto is that working software we value more than comprehensive documentation. I will not be talking about the working software, although we all know that it's our primary indicator of our progress, yes. I would like to talk a little bit about the documentation part of this value, because it's very important, especially in comparison to projects. So, 2012, Alistair Cockburn, who is actually one of the fathers of Agile, came up with this metaphor of software development, and he described it not as kind of a process where we develop something, but as a process of knowledge acquisition. So on the left side, you see a curve of knowledge acquisition in traditional projects, where we are developing our software, piece of software, step by step, and only in the end we deliver something, we show something to the customer or to the users, and this is when we actually start getting the knowledge about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build. So it usually ends up with so-called Big Bang deployment or Big Bang delivery, where you delivered everything and then you get the feedback that it was not quite what was expected from you. On the other hand, we have a knowledge acquisition curve of Agile, where we are trying to manage the risks of not having all of the knowledge in the beginning of the project and during the project, not by creating a lot of documentation, but with frequent deliveries of working software, working pieces of software, showing them to the customers, showing them to the users, getting the actual feedback, and thus receiving some more knowledge of what we are actually doing. If we talk about the cost of such kind of approaches, so we may see something like this. It doesn't necessarily mean that agile approach is so less pricey than the traditional one. It may be not that low, but the main point is that we're not trying to reduce the risk of not knowing something right in the beginning of the project, up front to development, where we start developing some detailed project plans and detailed requirement specs, which actually are not followed all the time, as we know. So what we do is we are following two approaches here. First one is keep it straight simple, which means that we are doing only we are not overcomplicating the things. We're trying to keep our documentation as simple as possible. And the other approach here is it's called "you ain't gonna need it." Yagni, that's a term. Okay, so it means that you're not doing anything up front. You're doing things only when you really need those things to be in place. So if you need some project plan, okay, you go ahead and you create one, but you create it not because there is some line in some standard or somewhere else where it's written that every project should have the detailed project plan. No. At some point you realize that you lack of this project plan and you go ahead and create it, but you keep it simple. So all of the time you try to understand what is the main purpose of the documentation you're actually creating, and you're doing the documentation that covers this objective and not going beyond that. Also, sometimes it's known that the customers want some piece of documentation to be delivered in the end of the project. That's fine. That's a deliverable. So go ahead, come to the team, and include this part, also small pieces of documentation to be updated, and all throughout these iterations of the projects. So in this case, you also will reduce some efforts on the maintenance, because the more complicated the documentation is, the more you spend to keep it updated. And there is also, the traceability process, the tracing process, which is really hard to maintain if you have huge documentation. Like, I don't know, I know a project where people calculate the documentation not by the pages, but by the kilograms delivered. So, okay, so this is kind of an overview of how do we treat documentation in agile projects. But again, so the project is actually created to share the knowledge. And if we reduce the documentation in our project, so how do we share the knowledge? And this is what we'll be talking about in a webinar as well. So getting back to the agile documentation, there are some good practices I promised to reveal, which is not kind of something which is unknown. So the first thing, and I love it the most, is the executable specifications. So probably some of you heard of behavior-driven development and the acceptance testing-driven development. which is, so you write the test, the acceptance test before you actually start coding. And there are a lot of frameworks nowadays that allow you to create them not in the programming language, but in the common language, as you may also see on the screen. And the best thing about that is that this documentation is self-maintainable. We create this behavior-driven behavior tests to run them on the continuous integration server. So you create the test, you run the code. When the test passed, it means that you're done with your piece of functionality. But if, I don't know, 10 months later, someone has to redo something about your that piece of functionality you developed, he runs the code, he runs the test, and immediately sees that there are some problems, and he has to decide if that's a problem with the functionality or with the implementation of the problem with the test. And if it is with the test, he just corrects it, just a couple of test cases, and thus, again, you have an up-to-date specification, which is actually describes the current version of software, not something that you had, I don't know, a couple of months ago. The next thing is simplicity, and I already touched it a little bit. Yes, you remember, keep it straight, simple, and you ain't gonna need it. The thing here is that so we usually tend to have some, I don't know, documentation standards or something that say that we need this, and that in that described in that language, and so on and so on. But here is, again, if it's not a deliverable, you have a bunch of people sitting together and working on the same project. They're on the same page. So why not using the language they're actually speaking? Why should we overcomplicate these things? And if we don't, I mean, overcomplicate, then it will be easier for them to understand and to get the knowledge from this documentation rather than to spend sleepless nights on understanding what is actually meant there. The next one is information radiators. We love this approach, really. So, like shown on the screen, for example, this is a traffic light used for showing the status on the continuous integration server. It's not, and there's a lot more information that you can actually put on the walls and update it and have it up to date all the time, because usually we teach our teams, and now I'm telling this to you, that the easier we can update the radiators, the more value they actually have, because they are up to date. It's easy to keep them up to date. So if you need something really frequently, just put it on the flip chart, put some sticky notes somewhere on the wall, somewhere where everyone in the team can actually see that, and okay, that's a good practice. And the other thing I would also like to mention, just take a second and think, if you have a problem, where will you search for the information regarding that? Probably Subversion, where you store the code, the tests, or probably Confluence page in Jira, or it will be some emails sent to you a couple of months ago. It's a common situation when this information is spread via emails and so on and so on. But the thing is that if you have a golden source of documentation, a golden source where you store all the data, all the vital things for your project, all the essential knowledge. You will have quick access to that. It means that you will get an answer to your questions as you need them. So I would also like to mention one thing here. We believe, or I personally believe, that the best way to this documentation in the systems is using some kind of wikis and social engines as well, just because you may always collaborate on the things and you can always discuss and check, and so the documentation keeps living, is being updated, and still it is a golden source. You have one place to store that. Okay, so the next thing I would like to discuss with you is explicit and tacit knowledge. So what I was talking about right now, it's an explicit knowledge. It's the knowledge on what we actually do in the project. But there is a much bigger part of the knowledge inside of your projects, which is actually cannot be easily transferred. It's tacit. It's called tacit knowledge. The difference between the explicit knowledge and the tacit knowledge is the following. I will give you an example. So, for example, you're using some kind of programming framework for developing your software. And so the manuals for this framework that all of you obviously read is an explicit knowledge. It's something that can be easily written and read. But when you start implementing things using that framework, when you're trying to understand how to do things with this framework in your context, in your project, that's a tacit knowledge that cannot be easily transferred from one person to another because it is based on the context, and it's acquired only through practice, only in that context that it has. That's why, for example, I don't really like most of the speeches during the conferences. I mean, not all of the speeches, but the experience reports where people come and tell how they do things, because not everyone understands that the context these people are talking about, or they forget to tell about, is actually of great value, because the tacit knowledge works, it's a practice in the context. So what we're interested here is how can we transfer the knowledge, how we can transfer tacit knowledge between the people in the team, how we can make tacit knowledge explicit, or I will also mention something about transferring tacit knowledge to explicit, explicit to tacit. And I will not speaking about transferring explicit knowledge to explicit knowledge just because it's okay. So you have a documentation and you can write another piece of documentation based on the previous one. So that's how you transfer explicit knowledge to explicit one. Yeah. I know that if there are managers listening to me, so probably you shivered for a while, just because pair programming is not a very popular thing with the managers, because sometimes people think that it's quite a pricey thing. And yes, there are some additional costs here, but the thing is, just imagine, so you have a newbie in your project, and he may spend quite a time reading the documentation that you have created. So he will spend time on documentation, then he will spend time on trying to implement. What time will pass until that guy will be able to deliver something? Quite a time. And on the other hand, you have an option. You start doing pair programming with this guy. So probably not just one guy in the team does that, several guys. And by doing the pair programming, we have the outcomes immediately, and the guy learns quicker. So if you use the pair programming for transferring tacit knowledge from one person to the other, it doesn't matter if that's a newbie in the project or someone who is not quite familiar with the piece of functionality he's about to develop. That's really the next thing is a code review. So it's kind of a light version of pair programming, I would say. But anyway, so what is good about that? Yes, so I did something, I show it to somebody else, and he provides me with immediate feedback, or with less immediate, depends on the process that you have in your project. And the good point about code review, what I love the most here is, first of all, it's transferring tacit knowledge to explicit. So someone is looking at your code and provides you a formal, for example, feedback in comments in your code review system, or once in a project a long time ago, it was absolutely not agile. We had some pieces of paper and we wrote the the feedback there. So anyway, there is another side of that thing. For example, again, you have the newbie in your project, and you have to introduce to him to the things that you do. You have these code reviews stored somewhere, and I know the team who are actually doing the code review in some system, and all the data is stored there, and they just give that person an access and ask to read these reviews. Because while reading these reviews, you don't only understand how to write code, but you also understand what are the ways you make the decisions in this project. That you better understand of how you use the frameworks and so on and so on. So it's also a good practice to use in your projects. Here is the thing that is actually also some kind of tacit to explicit knowledge transfer. The thing is here that you can easily use this one to to plan, for example, pair programming. So this is called a star map. So what we have a list of the functional of some knowledge that your team has, some experience and some business knowledge, frameworks knowledge, programming languages knowledge, and you have your team listed. So you can go ahead and ask everyone in the team to mark his knowledge in the subject. You can develop your own grades. Here we have something starting from 0 ending with 4. That's fine. I actually don't know what it means, but I guess that 4 means the guy is a god here, and 0 means that the guy doesn't know a thing about that, and something in between. So, for example, what I can see from the particular star map you have on your screens. So just take a look at wheel and at the RPC. What will happen if we have some RPC related tasks while wheel is on vacation? I guess that's a risky thing to have. Do you agree? What we will do? Next time we have the RPC related things, we'll ask Will to pair program with Brad, for example, and Brad will increase his knowledge and will be much better at these things, and so we will be able to go ahead and plan his vacation, even if there's some work on that planned. So that's it. And you can increase the overall knowledge in your project by using this star map. You can search for the bottlenecks of your knowledge using this star map. So you have an example also in the background how people are trying to fill that star map. Okay, so the next thing is the community of practice. So, for example, you have several development teams, and every team has BAs, developers, QAs, and so on and so on. And the thing is that we need to transfer the knowledge between them as well. So, community of practice is one of the means to do that. It's like you gather them together once in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, in a quarter, and they share the knowledge. They have discussions. They have open spaces. A lot of things can be done here. But the only thing that if you, after this webinar or sometimes later, you would like to create some kind of community of practice in your organization, remember that it's very hard to make this community of practice really valuable for each of the participants. And if it's not, then he will go away and will never return. It will be very, very, very hard to get him back. So there are things to do about that. For example, if this membership in the community of practice is not free, I would say, which means that he has to comply with some requirements, or he has to have some particular experience. In this way, he will be proud to be a part of the community of practice, and despite of not having some good experience every time and some good outcomes, he will still be joining the community. So that's just one of the practices. And the other thing which we're, for example, also using, and we also use the community of practice, but is blogs. Yes, so you have a blog and you can tell the people about your experience and some practices. So we have a blog platform inside Luxoft, for example, and outside. So that's also an idea here. And I guess that's mostly it about the context of the webinar. So if you're interested in other learning objectives, or if you want to learn more about this one, so come to our trainings or fundamentals training. This was the part of the Agile Fundamentals training. We also have some other certified trainings which will be very useful. And speaking about the webinars, we have a next one that will be performed by Vyacheslav Moskalenko, October 30. You're very much welcome. And that's it. I guess it's time for questions. Okay, so I have a few questions here. Simon has already answered. some of them. Okay, so yeah. So okay. The first question from Cornell, the star map may be subjective, and some of the people may over-evaluate themselves there. Yes, that's true. That's true, but when you start doing things, you will soon understand it. It's not. You see, this is not kind of I don't know a structured process with great risk management and so on and so on. The team should understand that they have some gaps in their knowledge, and if they work together, they really do understand that here is the gap and there is the gap, and I don't think that they will really over evaluate themselves. I saw different situations when they under evaluated themselves. That happens from my experience much more frequently than this one. So you shouldn't be afraid of that, I guess. The next one from Paulina. How do you share tacit knowledge between people who are not located in the same office and country? There are services that allow you to do pair programming remotely. So right now I don't remember any of that, but I think there can be easily Googled. You can use Skype or Link, something where you share the screen. So someone is typing the code and the other one on the other side is actually being the observer, and then they change. So I don't think that's much of a problem, but I see your point. Yes, sitting together in front of one computer PC, that's much more efficient here. But still, use Skype, that won't be a problem. What about new joiner? We had to spend a lot of time to teach them if there is no documents. Anna is asking. So Anna, I guess, if you do the pair programming with the newcomers, they will spend much less time on onboarding into your project. It doesn't mean that you don't need to have a documentation. If you had to have one, so you go ahead, you give them some docs to read, they read them, then they start programming with the other guys more senior. Hope I answered your question. Andrei is asking me to show him the slide with the costs of document creations and maintenance. Just a second. Here it is. You may take a look at that while I'm answering the other questions. Christina is asking what roles you think would be the best to start running the best practices in a project. Thanks. I'm not quite sure I did understand your questions correctly. So the thing is that, so if we're using, for example, the pair programming, so it's obvious that we start with the developers, but I know a company who are doing they develop trainings for other organizations. They're providing trainings, and they develop trainings using the pair work approach. So the same rules as in pair programming, but they're not doing the code. So it doesn't actually means that you have to have some particular role within your organization. It's much more. So it's more about what work you're actually doing. If you have the knowledge about your work, if it's risky, if it's very risky and you have to do less mistakes there on the first run, you can also consider doing pair programming. And all other practices I cannot, except for executable specifications, of course, can be easily used by any role within an organization, I guess. Evgeny is asking, is there a similar technique for analysis of product managers? I guess I already answered that, but again, in Agile Practice, we sometimes do the presentations using the pair programming, or if we need to write some big email having no context, we also do that. So we don't really need to be developers to do that. And Andrei is suggesting us to use Screen Hero. Thank you, Andrei, for pair programming remotely. Thanks. TeamViewer is okay for pair programming. Razvan is also telling us. In pair programming, knowledge is shared only between two persons. Do you know any practice for sharing knowledge between about more two people like pair program? Yes, you do the pair programming in circles, like you start with two guys on a pair programming, then they switch not. So I don't know, they work one day this pair, then they switch the pairs, and so on and so on, and so they spread the knowledge between all of the projects. I saw a team where they had even a schedule of performing the pair programming inside of the project. So which day, who is pairing with whom. So I guess that will be an answer to your question. How to boost wiki population? May we divide all our knowledge on a few knowledgeable areas and set somebody responsible for each area. And these responsible people should answer all questions till they make a wiki on that area. When they make a wiki, they may simply send a link to the wiki instead of answering the question. So this should stimulate them to create wiki. Why not? Quite an approach. So the thing about all this practices is that they are context-based. So depending on the context you have in your project, depending on the things that are valuable for you right at the moment, you choose the approach. So if this is the approach that is actually working for you right now, no problem to use that at all. Absolutely. Anne, you cannot see the slide now. Can you see the slide? No. Nice. And now, I'm sorry for that, yeah. Okay, so I'll give you time to ask me questions about the slide since I haven't showed it to you. Yeah, I have some questions here that I missed, so let me quickly answer them. Okay, yeah, and I have a few new questions. Okay, so the first one from Danila, how do you think which approach better, one-time live knowledge transfer session or recorded video? I believe that the better approach is the approach that works for you better. So you should just try and understand what is better. But from my experience, the personal communication, when you don't watch the video but you talk to a person and have an opportunity to discuss something with him, is much more better than just watching the video or reading some documents. Regarding the community of practice, Wojciech, unfortunately, I don't think I can answer this one right now. So, but if you are interested, Wojciech is asking about the community of practice initiatives. So you can contact me. You have the my email, so I can also send it to the chat right now. And I will do my best to answer it. So, okay, so the last few questions here regarding this slide, I guess. No, the first one is, will you share the presentation after the webinar? Yes, I will share the presentation after the webinar. For the Luxoft employees, it will be in Agile Practice Luxdown page. And for the others, we have a YouTube page and we have a slide share. So, okay, so how can you describe major difference or major signs that you have enough documentations for the start in agile manner? Yeah, that's a good question actually. I would say the sign is that come on guys, we don't know what to do here. So we need some paper. So if the team decides that they need some docs, just go ahead and bring him the docs. I mean, collaborate with them, collaborate and create some documents here. So there's no kind of sign that comes from external, from the environment. Every sign in Agile comes either from the business or from the team. So if the business asks you to create some documentation, you go ahead and create a documentation. If the team asks you to create a documentation, they go ahead and create a documentation. It's kind of this. What is the difference between high-level and detailed plan requirement or architecture? I don't think that's kind of a subject because we're talking more about Agile thing rather than a traditional project, but I guess you can open any book about this traditional software development life cycles, and there will be a difference told, I guess. A lot of people start projects without proper analysis and end up with the Frankenstein's monster project, but I agree that tests are executive documentation. They're executive documentation. So the slide confuses about documentation. Come on guys, again, it doesn't mean that we don't really need to avoid documentation. It means that so how does a traditional project start? We sit together and we create documentation. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Then we show it to the customer and come on guys, is it something you want? More or less, okay, and we go ahead and do the further job. In Agile, what we do, we spend 2 weeks and deliver the software, and then we see if the way we are going is right. And while we are going, we're checking if everything that we need, like architecture, yeah, so it doesn't mean that we don't need a high-level architecture plan. We may probably need it, and then we will develop it. But if we're developing, I don't know, 1 month piece of software, why do we need that? We just go ahead and develop. So that's kind of this approach. So if we need it, yes, if it's a big system and we we usually spend time, we invest time in doing the architecture, but we're not doing it before we deliver. We deliver, and on the same time we elaborate the documentation. Do you have experience with sharing knowledge between team by regular representation about every person in a team? I don't have an experience of presentation about every person, but with but the presentation performed by every person. I have an experience. Yes, it worked for quite a while, and not quite a while, for a long time. The team had their backlog, and they had a time on Thursdays where they did these presentations every week, and the people chose the topics from the top of the backlog and did the presentations that worked fine. Andrei says that Agile starts at the development phase. It doesn't start at the development phase. I mean, it doesn't skip all other phases. Yes, they start on the same time. Can you share location with the presentation? Simon has just posted it in the chat. It's the slide share location. For the YouTube location, yes, and the YouTube channel as well. It's all there. So guys, I think it's time. Thanks for attending. I really loved the questions and that you were so active. So I will send you the emails with your credits for learning objectives of knowledge sharing, and meet you at next webinars. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Mikhail, and the webinar when it will be ready.
Doe je er?